this salon is around the idea that we all have a personal sensorial vocabulary that is ours, and that is not necessarily related to the meaning of the words, but it's more related to the feeling that the words elicit in our bodies. And I feel that words have infinite dimensions and stories within them. Like with one word, you can, create a number of stories, and so this song is about kind of digging in a word to find the gold in it. Is to pick a word that speaks to your body. And again, it doesn't have to be, like the meaning is not very important. I can share some of my words with you, and it can be any language, right? So for instance, there's a, I think palindrome is a word in English as well, right?
Oh, where it's spelled the same forward and backward?
Yeah. So the word palindrome, I really love. It's like just when I say it, I like it. It like feels good in my mouth, feels good in my body. There's like a Japanese word that's like naruhodo, and I love that word.
That is a good one.
And it means like, oh yeah, that's why. That's what it means. So it doesn't have to be like a fancy spirit or like a fancy word. It's more about the sound of it and how it feels in your mouth and in your body when you say it or when you hear it. Have an overview of everything that came with this word: images, movement, energy, quality, other words, memories, sensations. Just as if you were looking at a landscape. And become aware that that word lives within you with all of this. Every time you say it, every time you use it, you can bring forward all of these things with it, if you want to. And then taking your time, you can come back to the screen.
For me, the story was really indigenous to the word itself. Like it just kind of emerged. And it's funny because I didn't spend too much time thinking about my word. I was like, what do I like to say? And that was it. But when I initially said it, the image this popped up of like this bee that's like going on all a crazy trajectory, and like I saw like a cartoon like with the dotted lines going everywhere. And then I felt it at the base of like my pelvis, like deep in my tailbone. And I felt it like going around to the bones of the pelvis. And then it would shoot up and out my like right shoulder. And I just kind of felt that first. And then I was really taken to an image of me at my as a child, like probably 7 or 8 years old. And I was in my favorite like amusement park in Cedar Point, and I would go there like every summer. And all I wanted to do was ride rides. I was such an adrenaline junkie, even at that age. And I would like stuff my shoes with paper towel to try to be taller to go on some of the rides that were bigger. And, but I would just get sweaty, and it's in the summer, and I would wear these like little stretch pants of midget and crop, like little midriff and crop top. And, then I would just run around that park like a little bee. And it was just like chaotic and beautiful and joyful. And that's what, I mean, it came pretty quickly. And so the rest of it was like the different components of the word, and were like the different elements of that persona that I was, of like the of like, fine, I'm doing whatever I want. And then the like re in the frizz was like, oh, I'm in, I'm gonna do it, I'm down to do it. And then the zzz was all of the energy. So like together it really encapsulated who I was at that moment in time. So I just felt very exuberant throughout it all.
I was a little bit more muted, I think, because Kanna just immediately brought me back to nostalgia, and it immediately brought me to one of my favorite grand aunts who is no longer. And so it was very much a very strong ancestral memory that she just prevailed. And I had a very strong image of her face, and I could hear her voice calling me that. And naturally, I think it brought me to like there were tears that came, obviously, because I miss her dearly. And then when you asked us to break down, and I was feeling it as I was even saying the word, I was filling up my throat, and surprisingly in my heart as well. I don't know why I'm surprised by it, but my throat, I never feel it so distinctly, and I did. And then when I had us like parse the syllables, I was so resistant. I didn't want to go there. And then so I did ka, na, and I'm like, this is so meaningless. My brain was going like, this is so meaningless. And then suddenly what happened was I suddenly went into the Hindi alphabet, and I don't really speak Hindi as a language, but I went into the recitation that children do in school, ka, ja, na. And then it became very percussive. And then I was just like bobbing around, doing my little dance. And so I was like, if anyone is looking at me because I had my eyes closed, I know I look like a little like mutant, but like a moment where I just was so lost in just the percussion of like words that were not the original word. Those syllables took me to other syllables.
That's
And,
like,
you know what I mean? And then it transmuted the whole thing for me, because then it became like a dance. I wasn't necessarily moving around, but I was feeling the wave of these things moving, and I didn't go much beyond that, is all I would have to say to you. It was quieter, and it was rhythmic, and it definitely just pointed to a very deep yearning for home.
when your words are full of this, then they're that much more powerful.
Yeah.
When you're using them. And I think we're not very aware of that dimension and that capacity that we have to kind of add a whole world behind words that we use. And we don't have, obviously you can't do it like every word in a sentence, but if you know your own vocabulary and your own, you know, like what you resonate, the words that you resonate with, you can kind of pull them out of thin air to put like weight behind what you're saying, your sentences. What's interesting is that when you start writing metaphors, they tell a lot about you, that they tell way more about you than explaining who you are. Like if you start, you know, if you're trying to, that's what I try to kind of communicate with people, is like, if you're trying to communicate with someone how you feel or who you are, it'll be much more efficient to go to a metaphor, because way more layers are gonna be in there, even if you're not aware of it. You know, like if you try to equate your feeling or whatever you're trying to communicate, like, oh, okay, what images come to me with this? Like, how can I express this as a metaphor? And that will be much more efficient, because it will speak directly to the other person's subconscious instead of staying like in the cognitive. And then you'll have a much deeper interaction.
So after kind of experiencing this, I obviously always come back to my like actor lens through which I frame things. And obviously this is exceptionally useful, because when you're an actor, you have to basically claim words that aren't yours, you know, and make them yours. So it's a sense of great ownership. But for someone who doesn't necessarily do that for their job, like who do you think would benefit from this kind of work?
I mean, I think everybody, but that's me.
Me too.
Definitely writers, people who have to speak in public, people who have to, you know, convey, like therapists, people who have to convey depths of emotion or depths of self through words. Anybody who works with language, which is pretty much everybody, right?
Coaches, yeah.
Coaches, people who have to hold, like people who have to fill a space with their energy, like people who want to, or within their work or within their life, they are in a position where they have to take people with them. You know, like they have to fill a space with their energy and kind of take people into the experience with them, which is a lot of people, like that's my case. Like it's, you know, I find it helpful to do that. Like if you're not already aware of this, like this is not something that I do necessarily consciously, but it's because I'm super sensitive to it. You know, it's just like words, oh, for me, like words immediately have images and colors and like all number of things. But if you're not super aware of this, and if you're very kind of cognitive based and like meaning based, and you're a little cut off from your body, for instance, consciously working with the sensoriality of words will really help you when you're in space with people to kind of take them, you know, with you through what you're saying and through your words and how you're using them. And also it makes you more sensitive to rhythm, you know, how you use rhythm when you speak, how you use your voice. There's a whole, you know, we could do a whole class about and it's like akin to like, you know, hypnosis, like people who do hypnosis or who do altered consciousness state, they know this very well. Like you can use your voice to kind of take people with you places.
Storytelling,
you know,
people listening to books on tape, you know, that goes to a place because of not just the words being said, but the way it's said too. It's I've always thought that storytelling is like a very lost art form, and I think this is so like this is step one to
exactly, because it's like it really anchors you into your, and storytellers will tell you like they have to like professional storytellers, they have to, when they're telling a story that already exists, they try to modify it so that they can bring sensorial elements to the story that speaks to them, right? Because something happens and it gets anchored into your body, and so your capacity to fill the space gets greatly expanded. Like if you're just talking from a cognitive space with the meaning, you know, trying to convey meaning, then the people who are listening to you will just receive in cognitive space, and we know what that.
Yeah, your eyes zone out like, after like 30 seconds.
Just like if it's too long, your eyes glaze, and people who have this quality of kind of suspending people to their lips are people who know how to use words in a way and rhythm and pace and, you know, and body, so that they're kind of really like bringing everybody into their own experience.
How did you come into contact with this work?
But I just like, I'm not gonna say I created it because I'm sure other people have done this. But when I started wondering, okay, how can I communicate the way that I experience language without having to do all this, like that's just how I experienced language from when I was very young. Then I came up with this exercise, you know, just like, okay, how can I help people kind of connect to the words as like a multidimensional aspect and a more embodied aspect. Then I was like, okay, what can I, you know, how does this work for me unconsciously? Kind of what I do all the time is like stuff that I do unconsciously, I'm trying to make them conscious so that I can kind of, you know, bring people.
I think probably a lot of people do it. We have some friends coming over tonight, and they're bringing their 2.5-year-old son, and he's just really learning language. And the last time I visited with them, I had pictures on my phone from my trip to Costa Rica. And so I was scrolling through it with him, and he would see water, and he is half Dominican, half Portuguese. So he switches between the two languages a lot. And he was like, oh, agua, I know that one, agua. And then he came across this picture that I had of a sloth, and he looked at it and goes, kind of like, I don't have a thing for that. And I was like, sloth. And he looked at me, and the way my mouth was moving, he goes, sloth. And then he looked at it and goes like, like he was feeling how he was saying it, seeing how I was saying it, seeing the image, getting the feeling of what that image brought. And I was like, wow, it really is like breaking down the steps to how we learn words.
Yeah, and
I
it's
will say
yeah,
one
go ahead.
thing.
Go ahead,
Like,
Nirupam.
and I have to go one step back before Kate. I was envisioning this exercise of like really being a good breaking the ice, or when a couple are in conflict, where the tension is really thick in the room, and you basically, people are either nervous to just lead with something as neutral as this, because there's something so endearing about, as you said, Kate, like a person entering the word and then describing a metaphor of them, as you said, Laura, and then taking ownership of it, where you're seeing a person travel like from a very childlike place to then like creating the story about them. And I think it was also for me a very beautiful way of relational narrative making as well. It says a lot without really, and it de-risks the situation as well.
Yeah, and you can obviously, you can also do it with words. I mean, for the purpose of this exercise and just for the, you know, for the pleasure of it, we use words that feel good, but you can use it with words that don't feel good. Like any word that you have like a physical reaction to is interesting to go and look into, because it will tell you stuff about yourself. You know, like when you go to the end of the process and you do write a story about it, if you like the next step is look at the story and what does it say about who I am, and it always says something very interesting. So, you know, it's like it's kind of an endless exploration that you can do with that. Definitely. And it's interesting to do it with other languages as well, because different languages have different emotional and sensorial imprints. So it's really cool to do it with languages that you're learning, or with, you know, like maternal language versus something that you speak. You know,
this is fascinating. I feel like I want to look at all of the words that I use now and say like, why am I saying this? But that I'm sure goes down a rabbit hole. Laura, is there anything else, or Nirupa, anything else you wish to share with everybody?
no, I think that's about it.
This is fun. This does feel like word magic, and it ties into the almost Halloween date. So we hope to see you there on Zoom, October 30th. That's a Sunday, and it's from 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 12 p.m. Thank you so much, Laura and Nirupa, for playing along always. And these really are like, we're trying to say this more at the salon. We always say come as you are, but these are also creative play dates for us adults who don't really schedule play dates anymore. So I think especially for this one, come with that spirit of play. Yeah.